Hey there, night owls and thrill seekers. Welcome to Midnight Surge, where the shadows whisper and the dark holds secrets you can't unhear. If you're into this kind of chill, hit that subscribe button down below. Join the crew who never sleep easy, and let's dive into the dark together. Ready? Here's tonight's story. I'm not the type to scare easily. I've lived in Tacoma my whole life, seen enough weirdness working overnights as a paramedic to have a pretty thick skin. But this was different. Not fast and violent like an accident or an overdose. This was slow, quiet. It crawled under my skin and never really left. After my breakup last year, I moved into a one-bedroom house on the south side, not far from the airport. It's a narrow place. Old bones, hardwood floors that creak no matter how careful you are. I chose it because it felt safe, familiar. Quiet neighborhood. Mostly older folks. Nobody really paid attention to anyone unless you waved first, which suited me fine. The night it happened, I'd just finished a 12-hour shift. I got home a little after 6:30 p.m., tossed my gear bag on the couch, microwaved leftover pasta, and showered. Nothing out of the ordinary. My buddy Lucas had called to say we should catch the Brewers game that weekend. I told him I'd text, too wiped to commit. By 9, I was in bed. I don't sleep well after long shifts, so I usually leave the TV on low, some dumb documentary playing just loud enough to drown out the quiet. But that night, I turned it off. I wanted silence for some reason. The kind of silence where you can hear your own heart beating against the sheets. I must have fallen asleep around 10. I woke up at 2:11 a.m. I remember that exact time because the red digits on my nightstand clock were the first thing I saw. And they looked off somehow. Not blurry, not wrong. Just sinister. I can't explain it. Then I realized I hadn't just woken up. I'd snapped awake. Like when someone says your name in a crowded room. My body was on full alert before my brain even caught up. There was a tightness in my chest. My hands felt clammy against the comforter. I listened. At first, nothing. Just that low, electric hum of an old house holding its breath. Then, a sound. A light tap, like fingertips against glass. Once. Then again. A pause. Then 3 quick taps. My heart jumped. I held still. My bedroom is at the back of the house. The only window there looks out over the yard, 6 feet off the ground. Nobody should be able to reach it. I sat up slowly, straining to hear. The taps had stopped, but my ears rang with silence. I told myself it was a branch, a bird, the wind, but it wasn't windy, and I don't have trees near that window. Still, I got up. I didn't turn the light on. Habit, I guess. If someone was out there, I didn't want to silhouette myself like a dumb target. I crept to the window and tilted the blind just enough to peek through. Nothing. Yard was empty, just my trash bins in the shadow of the fence. I stood there for a while, watching. My breath left faint fog on the glass. No movement. Eventually, I backed away, returned to bed. I didn't fall asleep, though. At 2:47 it happened again, but not at the window. This time, it was a slow, deliberate creak of the wooden floor just outside my bedroom door. Someone was inside. The sound was so soft, I almost convinced myself I imagined it, but I didn't. I lay frozen, eyes locked on the half-open bedroom door. I always leave it cracked. It was a habit from years of living alone. Keeps the air flowing, lets you hear if anything happens. Now, that door felt like a portal, like something was standing just beyond it, watching. Another creak, my breath caught. I slid one hand slowly beneath the pillow, feeling for the flashlight I kept there. Not a weapon, just comfort. Light helps you see things, makes the darkness play fair. The beam clicked on with a soft snap, illuminating my nightstand, the far wall, and nothing else. Just my quiet, empty bedroom. But the hallway was still dark, pitch black. I stood up slowly, legs stiff with tension, and moved to the door. I placed my ear against it. Silence. I waited there a full minute, flashlight off now, heart drumming against the wood. Then I opened the door. The hallway stretched out in front of me, longer than it ever felt in the daytime. Moonlight from the front window cast pale rectangles across the floor. I could see the living room at the end, couch barely visible. I whispered, "Hello." My voice sounded too loud. No answer. I stepped into the hallway, barefoot. Each step felt thunderous on the creaking boards. I moved past the bathroom, the linen closet. Every shadow seemed to twitch. When I reached the living room, I stopped. The TV was on. I hadn't turned it on. It was muted, stuck on some old, static-filled local channel. White noise flickering across the screen. A documentary, maybe. Footage of birds circling a dead tree. Subtitles trailing across the bottom. I couldn't make out the words. Then I saw him. He was sitting on my couch. A man. Middle-aged, maybe older. Wearing a dirty green sweatshirt. Jeans with holes in the knees. His hair was thin, greasy, hanging over his eyes. He was watching the screen like it was the most normal thing in the world. I didn't make a sound. My mouth went dry. He turned his head slowly, like he'd known I was there all along. His eyes were glassy, unblinking. Then he smiled. Not a threatening smile. Not a kind one either. It was like he was inviting me to sit down, like this was our regular Thursday night routine. He lifted one hand and motioned. A small wave. Lazy. Almost bored. I didn't scream. I don't know why. I just turned and ran. Out the door into the freezing night air. Barefoot on the concrete. I didn't even shut the door behind me. I pounded on my neighbor's house until they opened, disoriented and half asleep. I couldn't even form the words. Just pointed, shaking. The cops came, checked the place. No one was there. No signs of forced entry. Nothing missing. Just the TV left on. My front door hanging open. They asked if I'd been drinking. If I had friends with keys, I said no. I don't give keys out. I barely even let people in. I like my solitude. The officer shrugged, said maybe it was a drifter, homeless guy. Probably more scared of you than you were of him, he said. But that man wasn't scared. He looked like he belonged, like he'd done it before. That was 7 months ago. I haven't moved. I should have. But something in me needs to understand it first. I've changed the locks, bought cameras. They never show anything. But sometimes I wake up at 2:11 a.m. Always the same time. Always the same feeling. My heart pounding, my skin cold, ears tuned to every creak of the floorboards. And some nights, when I pass the couch in the dark, it looks like someone just stood up and left the room. I never sit on that side of the couch anymore. I moved to Milwaukee last spring. It was one of those impulsive relocations you talk about, but never expect to go through with. Except I did. I took a job as a night technician for an IT company, working remotely from home after 10 p.m. most nights. Quiet hours, stable paycheck, no traffic. I liked it. The apartment I found was a converted upper unit in an old 2-story duplex. Faded brick, creaky floors, and a narrow staircase that made moving my desk and mattress a nightmare. But the rent was cheap, the landlord stayed out of my business, and it had 3 bedrooms, which felt like a luxury for someone living alone. I set up the main bedroom for myself. The smallest room became my workspace. The third one, tucked away at the far end of the hallway, I left empty. The door stayed closed. I had no use for it. I'd been in the place for about 6 months when I started noticing things. Small things at first. The door to the empty room would be cracked open in the morning, when I was sure I had closed it the night before. A faint scraping noise like wood dragging across tile would echo faintly from somewhere behind me during my shift. Too soft to pinpoint, too brief to chase. I told myself it was an old house, the kind that settled in the dark. But one night around 2 a.m., something different happened. I was mid-call with a client, screen full of cascading code, when I felt a cold draft against the back of my neck. I turned around. The office window was shut, curtains still drawn. The hallway light was off, but the sliver of space beneath the closed door of the empty room, at the end of the hall, was glowing faintly, like a flashlight had been left on inside. I stared at it for a long time. My call ended. I didn't move. I could hear the fridge humming, the distant rattle of a train rolling through the city. Then the light went out. I stood up, told myself it was a neighbor's light from across the alley, bouncing off a car window. A one-time reflection, that kind of rationalizing. I walked to the room and placed my hand on the doorknob. It was cold, like metal left outside in February. I opened the door slowly. The room was dark, empty as always. No flashlight, no bulb in the ceiling fixture. Nothing had changed, and yet it felt different. The air smelled slightly sweet, almost like citrus and dust. And then I noticed the closet. The sliding door was open just a few inches, and from where I stood, I saw something shift in the blackness. Not move, not lunge, just adjust, like someone trying to hold perfectly still after being noticed. I closed the door, firmly, locked it. Then I went back to my desk and stared at the monitor, pretending to work for the rest of the night. I didn't sleep, not because I was afraid of what was in the room, but because I was afraid of how easily I had convinced myself to leave it be. The next few days passed in a kind of mental fog. I stayed out of that end of the hallway completely. Didn't even glance at the door when walking past. I worked, I ate, I scrolled endlessly on my phone. Anything to avoid thinking about what I thought I saw, or imagined, or didn't want to confirm. But small things kept happening. I'd wake up and find the kitchen window open. Not just unlocked, open. Or the hallway light would be on when I knew I turned it off before bed. And once, while brushing my teeth, I heard the faintest sound of breathing. Slow, steady, coming from the air vent beneath the sink. I didn't want to believe it. I didn't call anyone, didn't tell anyone, because what would I say? Hey, I think something is living in the part of my apartment I refuse to acknowledge. Then came the night everything cracked wide open. It was a Thursday. I remember that clearly because it was payday, and I'd ordered takeout from this overpriced Thai place downtown as a treat. I set the food on the coffee table and sat down on the couch, just in time to hear a loud, deliberate click echo through the apartment, like a door locking. I froze. That sound hadn't come from the front door. It came from the hallway. I grabbed my phone and stood up slowly, heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my teeth. I walked to the hallway and stared down toward that third room. Its door was wide open, and on the wooden floor just inside the threshold, something new had appeared. A pile of clothes, folded neatly. Jeans, a dark t-shirt, socks rolled into a ball, and next to it, a ceramic mug I didn't recognize, full of lukewarm water. It was like someone had moved in, quietly, carefully, as if they'd always been here and just decided to make themselves visible, like I'd passed some kind of test. I backed away and called the police. My voice was shaking, words stumbling over each other. I stayed outside on the porch until they arrived. They searched the entire place. They found scratch marks inside the closet wall of the spare room, horizontal grooves about shoulder height. A thin mattress had been wedged behind a false panel I didn't even know existed. There was food, empty water bottles, a notebook full of handwritten entries that stopped abruptly 2 days before. The officers didn't find anyone inside, no signs of forced entry, no explanation, just silence. They told me it was probably a squatter, that it happens more often than you think. Someone slips in during a showing or construction, hides, waits, lives, then moves on before they're caught. But they never explained how he, or they, got past the locked main doors. Or why, 3 days later, I found my name written in the last page of that notebook. Just my name. No message, no threat, no goodbye. Just a acknowledgement. I moved out 2 weeks later, found a smaller place near the lake, 1 bedroom, no hallways, no spare rooms. My name's Theo. I moved to Ashland, Oregon last year for a job at the local radio station. I run the night shift programming, boring stuff mostly. I don't even speak on air. Just schedule music, patch in talk shows, occasionally take a weird call or two. I rent the upstairs unit of a split-level house on the edge of town. The lower unit's empty. The landlord's trying to renovate it, but I haven't seen any workers in weeks. I honestly prefer it that way. The place is quiet, especially after midnight. My kind of peaceful. That Friday started like any other. I got home around 11:30 p.m., microwaved some leftover curry, and brought it out to the little balcony that overlooks the sloped driveway. It was crisp out, cool wind brushing the trees. One porch light buzzed quietly above me, casting this soft cone of amber light that didn't reach past the steps. I remember thinking how nice it felt. Still. Empty. Like the world had finally exhaled. About 15 minutes in, I noticed someone walking down the street. Hoodie pulled up, long-legged strides, arms swinging stiff. I couldn't see their face, just the dark shape moving beneath the street lamps. At first, I assumed it was someone from the apartments up the block. But then they stopped, right across from my driveway. Just stood there, not looking around, not checking their phone, just facing my direction. I stared back for a few seconds. Fork paused halfway to my mouth, no movement. "Hey," I called out, friendly but cautious. "You good out there?" Nothing. Not even a flinch. I stood slowly. My back was tingling. Something about the stillness didn't feel right. Not like someone lost or drunk. This was different. Like they were waiting for a cue. Then they took a step toward my driveway. I stepped back inside, shut the sliding glass door, and locked it. I kept the curtains slightly parted, peering down. He, or it was definitely a man, now that I saw him better, was walking up my driveway, each step deliberate. His arms never moved, no sound, no shoes crunching gravel, just silent, eerie motion. He stopped again, this time at the base of the steps. I ducked back. My heart was thudding so loud I could feel it in my ears. I grabbed my phone and backed into the hallway, switching off every light I could without making noise. There was no reason this guy should be walking up my private drive. No signs, no mailbox down there, no mistake to be made. Still, I didn't want to overreact. Maybe he was lost. Maybe he thought the place was still 2 units. I opened the weather app, 12:16 a.m. Then came the knock. 3 times. Not frantic, not polite either. Just flat, like someone testing a surface. Then I heard the handle rattle, softly at first, then more forcefully. My stomach turned. I backed away from the door and whispered into the phone as I dialed 911. The operator's voice was calm. Mine wasn't. "He's at my door. Some guy. He's trying the handle now. I live alone. Stay on the line, Theo. Officers are en route. Do not engage. Is your front door locked?" "Yes." "I think so. I always lock it. Find a room to secure yourself in. Don't open the door. We'll get to you." I locked myself in the bedroom. No window, just walls and a single lamp. I turned it off. Then came the sound of splintering wood, slow and deliberate, like someone didn't care about being quiet. He wasn't kicking the door in. He was breaking it down piece by piece. The operator kept talking, but her voice sounded far away. I could hear something dragging along the floor outside the bedroom, something heavy. Then, footsteps, right outside the bedroom door. I heard the faintest sound. Not a word, not a breath. Just the doorknob turning ever so slightly. That's when I heard tires on gravel, a car door slam, then boots, rushing footsteps, voices. When the door opened seconds later, the cop didn't shout. He tased him. He didn't resist. Didn't speak. The officer told me he didn't even blink much. Just stared ahead as if something was still playing out in his head that no one else could see. I never found out who he was. No ID, no explanation. He hadn't broken in for anything. He wasn't on drugs. He wasn't even carrying a weapon. Just a small wooden block, sanded smooth on all sides, clutched in one hand. No charges stuck. They let him go a few days later, but some nights when I sit on that balcony again, I still see him. Not walking this time, just standing, halfway down the drive, waiting. My name's Darren. I'm a paramedic in St. Paul, Minnesota, and I guess I'm used to seeing people at their worst. But nothing from the job, not the crashes or overdoses or even the suicides, prepared me for what happened that weekend. Back in late October, my girlfriend Riley and I rented a lakeside house about 2 hours north, near a little town called Winton. She's a therapist, and we'd both been burning out hard. It wasn't some romantic getaway, not really. We just needed to hit pause. No phones, no emails, no news. The rental listing promised total seclusion, and no neighbors in sight. That sounded perfect. The house sat at the end of a gravel road that twisted through pine and birch trees, dense and tall. We arrived just before dusk on a Friday, with the wind throwing leaves in swirls across the cracked driveway. The house was older than the photos made it look. Gray wood siding, a sagging porch, windows with that slightly warped glass that catches the light wrong, but we liked it. It had character. Inside was one large open room, kitchen, living area, a fireplace, and a narrow stairwell that led to a loft bedroom that overlooked it all. No cell signal, no Wi-Fi. Riley smiled at that. "A real break," she said. The first night passed quietly. We cooked pasta, played a board game by candlelight, drank red wine by the fire. I felt myself unwind. That place had a strange kind of quiet, like the trees themselves were holding their breath. Around 1 a.m., I woke up to use the bathroom. I remember the way the air felt, cold, dry, somehow expectant. The loft was pitch black except for moonlight filtering through the skylight above our bed. As I padded downstairs barefoot, I noticed something weird. The porch light was on. We hadn't left it on. I peeked through the front window and my stomach dropped. There were wet footprints leading up the porch steps. Big, heavy ones. Bare feet. No shoes. Just a trail of dark, smeared prints, shining slightly under the yellow bulb. I stood frozen, heart hammering. I didn't want to wake Riley unless I had to. Maybe it was animal tracks. Maybe we just tracked something in ourselves. I stepped outside, squinting into the woods. The wind had died completely. No bugs, no rustling leaves, nothing. I took a few steps along the gravel path, but the tracks ended at the top of the steps. No approach. Just appeared there. I went back inside, locked the door, deadbolt, chain, everything. I didn't tell Riley. Saturday was cloudy and cold. We stayed in most of the day, reading, cooking, just keeping the mood light. I told myself it didn't matter. Maybe the prints were mine. Maybe I went out the night before and forgot. I'd been half asleep. I clung to that theory like it was a life preserver. That night, we fell asleep around 10:30. No wine, no fire, just the sound of the lake lapping against the rocks somewhere in the dark. I woke up to a creaking sound, slow, deliberate, the kind of sound wood only makes under weight. I didn't move at first. Riley was still asleep beside me. I opened my eyes and stared at the ceiling above us, the skylight now black. No stars, just darkness. Then came another creak, closer this time. It wasn't coming from outside. It was the stairs. Someone, or something, was walking up them step by step, as slow and patient as death. I sat up carefully, trying not to make a sound. I saw a shadow move across the floor below, just out of reach of the moonlight seeping through the side window. I leaned over, slowly, heart pounding in my throat. There was a man standing at the base of the stairs. No flashlight, no shoes, just standing there. I wanted to scream, but my voice was gone. I shook Riley awake as gently as I could. Her eyes went wide the second she saw my face. She didn't ask anything. She knew something was wrong. We stayed like that, not moving, not breathing, as the man slowly turned and walked back toward the door. The chain lock rattled slightly. Then nothing. I called the police. It took them almost an hour to get there, just like the listing warned. Far from town. They found no signs of forced entry, no footprints, nothing disturbed except the porch light, which was unscrewed and left hanging by a thread. They told us it might have been a drifter, someone who walked in from the old forest trail a few miles out. But that didn't make sense. The footprints never led to the house. We left that morning. Didn't even pack. Just drove. Weeks later, Riley asked me something I haven't stopped thinking about. "When you came back to bed that first night," she said, "did you close the porch door?" I couldn't answer, because I didn't remember ever opening it. My name's Rachel. I was 22 when this happened. A couple years ago now, but I still can't walk past certain streets without that tight, nauseous feeling in my chest. At the time, I was living in Durham, North Carolina. I just started working full-time at a little indie bookstore downtown. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills, and I liked the rhythm of it. Sorting through old paperbacks, chatting with customers, closing the register while the streetlights came on. That night, it was raining lightly, not a full downpour, just that kind of misty drizzle that made everything look blurry under the street lamps. I remember because I didn't have my umbrella, and I almost called for a ride, but I lived only 10 blocks away and had taken that shortcut a dozen times before. The shortcut was a narrow alleyway behind the shuttered old textile factory, just past a row of overgrown lots and a chain-link fence. It saved me nearly 15 minutes compared to the main road. I'd walked it late plenty of times. It always felt sketchy, but it was empty. No foot traffic, no homeless camps, just quiet. Almost dead. About halfway through the alley, I noticed someone sitting on a broken concrete divider near one of the abandoned warehouse doors. Hoodie pulled up, head tilted down. Looked like he was scrolling through his phone. I got that weird, tingling awareness, like the air shifted. I glanced down, sped up a little. As I passed, I tried not to look, but I felt it. The subtle motion. He'd turned his head. I didn't hear him get up. But after maybe 5 seconds, I caught a faint footstep behind me. Not close, just a shuffle. A lagging kind of step, like someone walking and stopping. I told myself not to be dramatic. People use alleys. Maybe he just realized he was headed my way. But when I reached the end of the alley, I turned right and glanced over my shoulder. He was still there, 20 feet back, hands in his pockets. No phone. I crossed the street without looking, then another. My heart was hammering so loud I could hear it in my ears. I didn't run. I just walked with purpose. 4 blocks to go. I peeked behind again. He was still following, not gaining, not losing, just keeping pace. By the time I reached my building, an old brick complex with no working intercom, and a keypad entry that jammed on cold nights, I was shaking so badly I dropped my keys twice. He was still coming. I didn't even wait to see how close he got. I got the door open and slammed it shut behind me, locked it fast, then bolted up the stairs to my unit on the 2nd floor. The hallway was empty. My apartment door had a double lock. I clicked them both into place and stood there in the dark, listening. I peeked through the peephole. The main door downstairs was still shut. No one had come in. Maybe he gave up. Maybe he'd just been walking home the same way. I tried to shake it off, took a shower, made tea, even texted my roommate. She was out visiting her boyfriend and wouldn't be back until morning. I hated being alone in that apartment, especially on nights like this when the wind rattled the windows and the radiator clanked like footsteps. An hour later, I finally let myself relax. I turned off the living room lights and curled up in bed with a book. That's when I heard the knock. Not loud, not frantic, just deliberate. One single knock on the back door. The thing is, our apartment doesn't have a back door. Not to the outside, anyway. There's a tiny maintenance hallway that leads to a utility closet and a rusted fire exit, but no one ever uses it. It's always locked from the outside. I froze. Another knock, same rhythm. Then a voice, low, almost casual. "Hey, you left your phone." My phone was on my nightstand. I hadn't dropped anything. I stood up slowly and tiptoed to the hallway, heart pounding. The back entry door had a cloudy, frosted window. You could see shapes through it, but not details. A figure, standing just on the other side. No knocking now, just silence. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, whispering to the dispatcher. While I spoke, the shadow suddenly disappeared. I heard the faintest sound, like metal scraping. maybe the fire exit. The police came. They checked the stairwell, the exit, the hallway. No footprints. No signs of forced entry. They told me it was probably a prank. Maybe someone from the building. Maybe I imagined the voice. But I know what I heard. I moved out 2 months later. I still check every door twice, every window. Sometimes I still wake up at 3 a.m., convinced I heard that knock again. And I never, ever take shortcuts anymore.
If these stories sent a chill down your spine, go ahead and tap that like button and subscribe for more eerie tales. What would you do if you were caught in one of these unsettling situations? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'd really love to hear what's on your mind. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next nightmare.